Good afternoon and welcome you all for the seminar which is presented by Dr. Arame. I have the pleasure of introducing her that basically she is the specialist in the area of climate services for the CGIAR challenge program on CCAFS, that is climate change and food security. She is based at ICRISAT, and many of you might not have seen her because I also see her maybe once in a month or once in 2 months. So she is on most of the time on travel around the different countries to fulfill the requirement of the job to enhance the awareness about the climate change services and the climate services for the farmers in different parts of Africa. And basically, we are here to hear from you the work what has been done in the area of climate services, building the awareness amongst the farmers, amongst the different stakeholders, and the experiences will be from South Asia as well as from the Africa. So without getting between you and Madam Arame, floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for having taken time from your busy schedules here at ICRISAT to come hear about climate services and the work that we do within CCAFS there. Thanks to Dr. Wani for that very glorious introduction. Indeed, I'm very rarely on campus, the reason being hopefully all this work that you'll be hearing about today. So I'm very grateful to all of you for coming to join us here in ICRISAT and live on the internet. So my work at CCAFS, which is the CGIAR Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Research Program of the CGIAR, focuses on climate services. It's a relatively new area of work. It's really to deal with information services for farmers as they struggle to adapt to a changing climate. It's a new word, as I say, so I'll spend a bit of time first explaining what we mean by climate services. You often hear climate information services, but you'll hear me throughout the presentation insisting on climate services without the information bit because of the need of tailoring to serve farmers' real decision-making needs. All the lessons that you'll hear from are from work over the past 2-3 years across Africa and across South Asia. Over the last year, CCAFS has opened two new regions in Latin America as well as in East Asia, both regional programs based in Colombia for Latin America as well as in Cambodia for East Asia. So the lessons are primarily focused from experiences in Africa and in South Asia because we haven't yet had a chance to start working in the two new regions. But even within those two regions, a lot of lessons have emerged, hopefully which will pave the way for future work in climate services. So without much further ado, let's begin. At the core of our work on climate services is the premise that information is power. And what we mean by information is power is that by enabling farmers to have advanced information on climate and what adverse impacts those climate events would have at their farm level, then you're giving them the power to be able to anticipate, to be able to know when these adverse events are coming on their farms, and to be able to do something about it. It's a simple premise. When you think about it, the model is also quite simple. We today have enough information on the level of climate scientists to be able to predict what climate and weather parameters will be over a given season, over the next months, over the next few weeks. Our lead time enables us to even go beyond the season and looking at a window of 12 months with certain levels of probabilities. You have climate projections which go as far up as decades, and even projections over till the end of the century, to 2100s. My colleague Kesava here would have been happy to see the slides on climate, but I've skipped those for the non-climate scientists in the room. But what we do know today with the abilities that climate science offers us is that climate is going to keep changing and uncertainty is going to keep rising across the globe. Specifically looking at the regions of Africa and South Asia, variability is going to go in a seesaw, whereby yearly variability in the season will keep rising up and down. And I think our farmers have already started seeing those changes in their farm levels. One year is extremely cold, the other is just extremely warm. A year has extreme rainfall events, and those are supposed to be good, but it's not distributed appropriately throughout the season. So those variability parameters impede farmers from having adequate yields and from being able to count on a certain and a predictable climate. So the premise here is that by giving them advance notice on what those events will be on their farms, then they're able to better prepare. And I'll give you a few specific examples here. If we're able to equip them with a seasonal forecast, an outlook over the next 3 months of the monsoon season here in India, for instance, or of the June, July, August rainy season in West Africa, then that farmer is able to adopt a few practices which would buffer the impact of those adverse impacts on the farm level. At the seasonal scale, some of these actions are as follows. They're able to select cultivars, for instance, for the season, to purchase appropriate seeds, and if the outlook is not favorable, to choose alternative livelihoods for the season, send their kids to the main city for work, for instance, and basically make sure that information is well communicated across the community. This is so that when another forecast comes to confirm or infirm the probabilities that were sought after during the seasonal forecast, and this would be, for instance, a monthly forecast, then they're able to be set after they got ready and anticipate wet, dry spells, variations in temperature, basically extreme events throughout the season. That enables them to manage risk in harvest operations, to determine the timing of appropriate interventions, such as planting and clearing fields, and warning the community on hazards through early warnings. So much so that when indeed the time scale gets even closer, and we are talking days, hours ahead of time, they're able to determine exactly when to conduct specific operations in the farm, determining what is the right time to harvest, the right time to spray pesticide and apply fertilizer, evading such crop losses, and even going as far as evacuating the community when the forecast is for an extreme event. So this model of the ready, set, go really exemplifies what we mean by using information to prepare, using information to anticipate. And the premise is that by enabling access, farmers' access to relevant climate information, we're able to empower then farmers to anticipate and confront climate-related risks on their farms, but also reap opportunities from predicted climate events coming on the level of their farm. That's the idea. Now, in practice, why is it that farmers are not getting the information, if it is indeed so brilliant and if it is indeed so useful for their work? We organized a large workshop in December 2012. This workshop was held in Senegal. And the point of this workshop was to convene experts from across agriculture and climate research fields and ask them, why is it that farmers are not accessing and benefiting from improved climate information services? This group of people, here's a picture of them. I think a number of people came from ICRISAT. We definitely had Sibiri in that picture. But what this group of people came to the conclusion of was we had 5 large challenges that were preventing climate information from getting to farmers, and that was stymieing their ability to act on it. The first of them was salience. The information as it is currently provided by the Met services in our respective countries, this information is not appropriately tailored in terms of content, in terms of scale, in terms of lead time to the needs of farmers at the field level. The second large constraint was that of legitimacy. Giving farmers an effective voice in the design of the climate information service that's due to benefit them was lacking, and grandly so. Farmers were just given information without being asked what type of information would they be needing. Across the board, access was also a large challenge. And indeed, information was present and prevalent at the national level in all of these countries in Africa and South Asia. But the problem was it wasn't being channeled to the farmers through information communication channels which were appropriate to reach them. Fourth, and this one was a big one across South Asia, as well as Africa, ensuring that women, poor and marginalized members of the community got the information right. Even in the best of cases, such as the India Agromet Advisory Program, which we evaluated last year, we found that information was there in the community, but women weren't accessing it. Low-caste farmers weren't accessing it. And that was an essential problem of equity, but also even improved outcomes within the community, livelihood outcomes based on information received. And last but not least, information was provided alone across the board. While information has no value on its own, it has to be packaged within larger packages of support and extension support. So these were the big five that came out of this workshop. And these really paved the way for the work we've done on climate services ever since. Addressing these five challenges became my personal work plan, and ensuring that across the regions where we operate, we were setting up climate services in a way that overcomes the five large challenges to usefulness for farmers, and also in a way that builds sustainable national systems for implementing climate services useful for farmers. Before we began the work, we also rested a lot on experience from the ground. We surveyed a total of 18 good practice cases from across Africa and South Asia. As I speak, we're about to publish the report summarizing the learning from these 18 good cases. But I just will give you a quick run-through to tell you the wealth of expertise that's already on the ground and which we can learn from. The first one is from India. It's the India Agromet Advisory Program, which our very own Kisava is very, very familiar with. He could be giving this spiel. But basically a program that's been operating since 2008 at scale, reaching over 3 million farmers through information that's derived from the Met Service, tailored by the agricultural research universities in each state, and then delivered to the cell phone of the farmer through KVKs in a way that's really useful for the farmer. There's many challenges that we found through this. It was a joint USAID and CCAFS assessment of the program. Ways to improve it from farmer testimonials, etc. But overall, a very successful example of how information can be made to use for farmer decision making. We surveyed a second large-scale case that was in Mali, in Western Africa. And there also, since 1982, the government of Mali and its Met Service have been providing tailored climate services for farmers. In doing so, they provided farmers with rain gauges, as you see here, and farmers were made to be local weathermen in many senses. They are trained to actually read the measurements from the rain gauge and decide upon appropriate decisions for the cropping calendar, when to plant, when to sow, based on where they are in the cropping season and the rainfall that's already occurred. So that also was a basket of good practice that we learned from. In addition to these large-scale national programs, we surveyed 16 smaller cases from across Africa and South Asia. One from Uganda, for instance, gave us good lessons on how we can use cell phones, working with community knowledge workers to be able to ensure that farmers are able to access a range of information services, including on climate. From Kenya, as well as Senegal, in the next slide, we've been conducting work since 2011, training farmers through a very specific training method, and I'd like to spend a bit of time on that later on in the presentation. But just in the overview, the farmer seasonal forecast training puts farmers in charge by equipping them with information on the season, but not in the tercile way we've been providing seasonal forecasts, but using a probability distribution function, the PDF, which really farmers have taken to, and which has enabled them to monitor probabilities of rainfall and other extreme events during the season. So really cool science there. I'll spend a bit more time on it. In Lushoto, Tanzania, that's the next slide, we've been able to work with farmers to blend traditional forecasts, which are very big in East Africa, with seasonal scientific, if I may call it, forecasts. So that also is another strand of work, which gave us a lot of good practice. CIMMYT has been leading interesting work in the Indo-Gangetic Plains, assessing farmer needs And what they found there as well was the need to work through information channels which were useful for farmers. The cell phones, for instance, women's self-help groups. So using those are as relevant channels for getting to the farmer and reaching the last mile with our information, climate information services. So these 18 cases combined really gave us the hope that this work is doable. We can reach farmers at scale with relevant climate services. But a number of prerequisites just had to be lifted, those 5 big challenges. I'll go through each of those prerequisites one by one. And what I'd like to do now is open the floor as I go along for questions and interventions. So I'll give you practical cases from the field as we've had them. If you have any question or clarification, please don't be shy to interrupt me. So the first challenge was that of salience, as I explained earlier. So our first task in setting out to promote and improve farmers' use of climate services was to work with national systems, brokering strong partnerships between national hydromet services and agricultural research, so that basically climate information isn't just that, but really a tailored advisory that can support farmers in making decisions. So in doing so, we set out to improve tailoring of climate information in what we call going from climate information to a climate service. That's why I don't like to say climate information services. I prefer climate services, and this is why. As of now, climate information rests in the ivory tower of the National Met Service, which has the forecasters, those people that know about climate. And we expect this information to percolate to the user, the farmer, seamlessly. We found, however, that it doesn't work that way. The boundary has to be extended to the agricultural research, the NARIS system in each of our countries, so that information leaving the hubs of climate knowledge get overlaid with information emanating from agricultural knowledge. And then you have what we call value addition. And it's through this value addition that usefulness to the farmer can really come forth. Making it even more revolutionary, we are proposing that the boundary be expanded to the farmer, him or herself, so that it's not just a process of one-way delivery, right there, but rather a process of co-production, whereby you start with asking the farmer, what are your particular needs in terms of information? You need information on which type of hazard. When would you like to receive it? What's the appropriate lead time? Through which channels should the information be shared so that it gets to you appropriately to support your decision making? Following that, National Met Services and NARIS collaborate to deliver to the farmer the information that he or she finds relevant. So this is the model with which we've come to the countries and approached this work. Mapping it out as a systems, what we found essential was to promote and build a national chain for climate services in each of our target countries. It starts, of course, with the National Hydromet, which is the source for hydromet forecasts. But beyond that, collaborating with NARISs, who are able to then package the information from hydrology and meteorology and produce a value-added agro-meteorological advisory that farmers can use. Once that production work is done, really working then with communicators and boundary organizations at large. And I'm speaking here of the media, rural radio associations, CBOs, women's health groups. People have even worked with school children to ensure that these can serve as vehicles of the information produced. And work through these partnerships, get to a widespread communication of the products and information services produced to get to the farmer. In this model, the target audience are not only the national level end users, where often most of the work stops. If the agricultural planner gets the information, we've done a good job. But in our work, the last mile has to be reached, and information gets to farmers, pastoralists, and those communities at risk that can make most benefit from using the information. And again, insisting on this two-way model, whereby it's the needs inform design, and as we go through the process, monitoring and evaluation captures the essence of usefulness for farmers. In practice, what has this given? It has given a lot of different partnerships from global to regional down to national level, because that's really just what it takes. global level centers of forecasting, and I'm mentioning here of IRI, the International Research Institute for Climate Prediction in Society, the World Meteorological Organization, through their regional arrays of the regional climate centers, have to collaborate with the national level to ensure that the best available climate forecasting capability is made available for farmers in the particular region. And we've come about with this framework that ensures, as I said, the cycle, identifying user needs, co-production, communicating to reach the last mile, and then enabling early action based on received information. And at the center of it all, equity, focusing on the needs of the most vulnerable. The second biggest challenge, as I said earlier, was to ensure that we don't just disseminate information, but that we really do communicate it. Through our work, we found that the relevant channels to reach farmers, and this will perhaps be interesting for our colleagues from KSI here, we found through our participatory action research that these channels were relevant to reach farmers. The first, of course, SMS. Farmers across Asia and across Africa have cell phones today. So the 21st century farmer has to be empowered with information services using cell phones. It's as simple as that. So through all our surveys, we found that SMS was the most important medium to reach people. Across regions, of course, there's specificities. But overall, that remained the case. The second important medium was the rural radio. Mostly in Africa, this came up as an important medium. Forecast bulletin boards posted across villages came about as important mediums to also get information to communities. I need to say that this was a proposition from the communities themselves, and who suggested this as an important way to increase access to this information at village level. They also insisted that information be disseminated and communicated through the mosques and churches in the community. At water boreholes, this was interesting in terms of our gender research. Women said, if you want us to get the information, you need to share it at water fountains and points where we gather every morning. If you skip that, the information just won't get to most of us. Community relays, working through NGOs and CBOs that already have firm grounding within the community. These we found to be trusted messengers, and having information go through them was seen as important. And the final one, as I said earlier, was school children. So ensuring that information is shared within the school. The child then comes home and informs the whole family, including the mothers. So that was an important way to also overcome challenges to access women decision makers and farmers. So all this combined gave us a better picture of how to communicate to reach the last mile, and this is one approach we've been promoting in all the sites where we work. A second important strand of work is that of training intermediaries. As I said, we've tried in each of the countries where we operate to build very solid partnerships between the national Met and agricultural communities and as they reach out to media. So here working with NGOs and CBOs became critical. This is a picture of us training intermediaries in northern Tanzania, in Same district, whereby a collaboration with World Vision enabled us to have access to their field staff, and here we're training them on how to serve as communicators of climate information. So understanding the science, the forecasts, and then leveraging their huge network of community relays and extension and development workers to basically pass on the information in each of the communities. So we'll keep doing this in the few years to come. That's the plan. And we're working on a training of trainers guidebook, which will be availed to all the media, agricultural extension, NGOs and CBOs that we work with, so they can build their capacity to serve as information relays. That's where we're going with that work. So the next challenge then that we've worked on across our field sites and CCAFS countries is that of gender and equity. And I can't insist enough on the importance of this work. Often I get the question, why is it so important? Because if you want to affect livelihood outcomes for farmers, shouldn't you be focusing on the overall aggregate impact in the community? And what we found through our research is that if you don't take gender inequity seriously, what you find is that the livelihood outcome in the community is not really improved. Because if the most vulnerable don't have the information, then it comes down to not having community impact as a whole. And furthermore, women have been found to be very good communicators of information once they were reached and involved. So I'll give you one example of PAR, so Participatory Action Research we conducted in Kaffrine, which is the CCAFS research site in central Senegal. And there we've led a project on gender, researching whether there were gender-specific needs in climate services. This has been going on since end of 2011. And there what we tried to do is identify the specific needs of women and other underserved groups, focusing on their place specificity of needs. And I'll just spend a bit of time explaining what I mean by this. Here are two villages. These villages are about 10 kilometers away from one another in the CCAFS research site in Kaffrine. And there, in one of the villages, you see here women are a bit more traditionally clad, so it's a more conservative Muslim village. There, for about a year and a half of consistently going into the community, they told us, sure, you can get us the information on the cell phones. These are the people to reach, etc. But it took us one visit in this adjacent village where women are a bit more progressive, let's say, to understand that really there were specific social-cultural norms preventing women's use of the information. And therein, in this village of Julie, men were, and this woman told us, men planned for themselves before they planned for women. So giving them information on seasonal onset is not as relevant for women groups. They insisted that we ensure that we give them information on when the season will end, so seasonal cessation. And that, to me, a trained climate scientist from this country, I'm from Senegal, was a huge revelation, because I would have never thought that indeed women would need different information than men did. So that was my wake-up moment on ensuring that gender is incorporated in this line of work. And finding that this was different from a place to another gave also a bit of a reality check for the work that we are trying to do, because needs will differ from one place to another. And ensuring that we capture needs from the outset and design appropriate services to address those needs is really important. A way to do that, and we've kept on doing that in all the PR work we've been doing, PAR work we've done across other sites, is to open the space to dialogue, open the space to ask farmers what their specific needs were, as you see on their picture, giving farmers the microphone and ensuring that their voices are heard and that mostly their innovations keep being captured as the project evolves. So from this particular project in Kaffrine, over the 2 years where we specifically targeted farmers to receive climate services from the National Met, we found that there was a 100% increase in access from a handful of farmers that received it at the early stages of the project in 2011 to all the members surveyed within the community by the end in 2012. So all farmers interviewed reported demonstrated usefulness of the information services they were getting, forecast on onset, extreme events and so forth, and that all products were mostly useful across the timescales, from seasonal all the way down to nowcasting. Finally, and that was the most humbling finding, is that they declared added value of this new scientific information relative to their local forecasts using traditional indicators. So the fourth, and this is the penultimate one, strand of work we focused on across our sites was really communicating uncertainty in climate forecasting. So if you're aware of anything in climate science, is that it's really difficult to pinpoint an event. So the closer you get to the time of the predicted event, the more certainty you have and probabilities rise. But the farther in distance you are, the more difficult it is to actually predict. So this is a simple game that we started. It's a darts game in training farmers during these workshops to explain this tenet of forecasting. And we had farmers literally just play darts and say, you see how difficult it is when you're far to actually hit the mark? The closer you get to the mark, then the easier it is to hit it. So this captures exactly how it is as well in climate forecasting. And this enabled them to really just get it and understand that probabilities were really nothing more extravagant than what they were already addressing in their decision making. and that this additional scientific information uses just additional tools to be able to forecast, which could be then useful for their decision making in the community. You see here at the bottom additional pictures of some of the new novel innovative tools we've tried to employ, games which simulated decision making for the scientists notably, and also explaining on the right side the difficulty of getting it right, quote unquote, over each location within a particular domain of forecasting. So all these different ploys allowed farmers to understand the limitations of forecasting, which is the first step towards building trust in using the forecast information at the local level. I mentioned earlier the PDF, the probability distribution function. So this is one of the key innovations from our work. We found that sharing probabilities with farmers at the beginning of the season was a key tool to have them utilize the forecasts. So you have pictures here of one of our very good collaborators from the Senegalese Met Office, Ousmane Diaye, Dr. Ousmane Diaye. And therein, you see him showing farmers what the outlook for the season is going to be. This was last year's season, so 2012. And on this picture, you see Ousmane demonstrating that really this is nothing more than farmers really what they do. And using tools of scientific forecasting, they're just able to see it with 3 months ahead of time. And this is what the probability looks like for the season. And shifting probabilities are to be expected. Farmers got that. They really understood the PDF well, and they took to it. What was impressive as well is that you see here the discussion that followed. Farmers saying, well, okay, if indeed shifting probabilities are towards above normal rainfall for the season, then what can we do to prepare? And they got on a discussion to really identify specific actions to prepare for that range of probabilities for the season. Rain gauges were also used within this training so that 1 millimeter of rainfall is understood the same way between forecasters and farmers, bridging the epistemological divide there. The same exact work was also piloted in the CCAFS research site in eastern Kenya, in Wote, and therein farmers also took to the methodology very well. The PDF was keenly appreciated by farmers, and their agromet advisories followed to actually recommend specific interventions at the farm level. And the very final challenge, again, I'd like to illustrate of work overcoming it is in designing and monitoring impact for farmers. In this strand of work, we've collaborated with a number of agencies, with USAID, with the CSP, the Climate Services Partnership, with WFP and the WMO, the World Met Organization, to come about with an M&E protocol that allows us to design, to monitor, and to evaluate the impact of such climate services for farmers. This was one of my key battles most of all, because as I always said, if we can't demonstrate the value of using climate services for farmers, then we should perhaps be out of jobs and do something else and go invest in improved seeds or irrigation systems, which are bound to function for sure. But if we are convinced, as I am, that information services can have impact for farmers, then we've got to make case for it and put a dollar value to how much impact it's been really having. So in collaboration with all our partners, we've been attempting for the past year to develop a relevant M&E protocol to identify the needs of farmers, but also measure added value relative to decision making without information. So the goals of this effort were to ensure that this M&E protocol is locally relevant, so it's adapted to the decision-making context of the particular community, and that second, that is gender responsive and looks at different usefulness categories for different sections of the community. So that has been a work package of its own, and it's taken a life of its own. ICRISAT has notably played a key role in this effort because we've hired here a consultant, Alicia, who's in the room now, and we've been working very hard to come about with a nice M&E survey to be used and shared with our partners. So based on the logic being that based on information collected from that M&E protocol, then national systems are able to better design climate services that will deliver on the needs of farmers. We've already done that in a number of countries, whereby based on identified farmer needs, we tailor information in space So using tools of geographic downscaling. An example is on the right, where we've been blending satellite information and station information to produce a geographically downscaled forecast. This is what we used, for instance, in Kafrine, in Wote, and in a new project we're starting in Tanzania from next year. But it's also downscaled in time. Basically, providing forecasts from the seasonal scale all the way down to the nowcasting, also using historical data. And products then have been delivered through all the projects which I presented earlier, running from the seasonal all the way down. And also downscaled in content. And the work on gender fits in this one very nicely, because we've been providing, and at least attempting to provide farmers with information which they have declared was going to be relevant to impact their decision making and their resilience to climate events at the farm level. In lead time, meaning that information is provided within the timelines that enables any decision to be made, because late information is hardly information. And finally, we've always endeavored to ensure that information was tailored in format and in language. One mistake we've made, for instance, in the Kafrine site was we started delivering messages in French on farmers' cell phones, which is an obvious no-no. But it took us to keep going to the community to figure out that they needed it in the local language. And again, across different time scales. So that was a lot. That was a mouthful, but that just gave a good overview of everything that we've been working on, and the good practices we've been trying to infuse most of all in the work across the regions and across the CCAFS benchmark sites where we've worked. Where are we going next with this work? What we'd like to do is to ensure that at least 10 million farmers by 2016 have access to tailored information services. It's a big number, but we think it's possible. Working through national partnerships, so again, brokering those strong ties between the National Met Service and the agricultural research, and proceeding through those multiple partnerships which we demonstrated with CBOs, with communicators, so that information does get to the last mile and to decision makers. So we are going at it in a stratified way, though. So conducting not only additional learning and experimental learning in our benchmark sites across East Africa and South Asia. In West Africa, these are in Kafrine, and here in Burkina Faso, in Yatanga, where from next year we would like to begin more work testing out the approach of scaling up climate services. In East Africa, we've got work lined up already in Wote, and as well as in Nyando, which are in Kenya, in Lushoto in northern Tanzania, as well as in Uganda. And in South Asia, the sites are in Rupandehi in Nepal, as well as in northern India, in Rajasthan. So these are the benchmark sites where we will be experimenting scaling up. But the real scaling up has to happen at the country level. So we will be focusing from next year on a few countries where these partnerships will be operated. So in East Africa, that's in Tanzania and in Malawi, where funding is already lined up thanks to a very generous grant from the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs of $10 million, which is dedicated specially to scaling up climate services for farmers. So CCAFS is a key partner on that project, and we'll be working in those two countries to scale up. In West Africa, we're looking at Senegal and Burkina Faso, where we'll be working over the next 2 years to ensure systems are gearing up to delivering climate services at scale for farmers, working in partnership there with the World Bank and the World Met Organization. And here in South Asia, the focus is on Nepal. On Nepal, where the World Bank has a very big grant on PPCR, which is the pilot project on climate resilience, including a huge component on climate services. So we'll be ensuring that climate services indeed are operated and enacted well to serve farmers in that country as well. So in each of those target countries, if we do well, we can reach even 10 million in that one country. But we've played a conservative estimate by saying 10 million overall. But we do hope to even exceed that target. You may be curious why in South Asia, not India. The reason being that India is already at scale and has plans to keep scaling up its climate services program for farmers. So in India, in South Asia, we are seeing India rather as a big partner and as a source of good practice to share with the other countries in the region, starting with Nepal. So that's where we're going. I need to acknowledge the work of here the KSI unit and for their help in setting up this map. They came up with it beautifully. It's actually live and interactive online at this link. So thank you folks for your help with setting this up. In a nutshell, if I were to summarize our approach in going forward with this work, we'll keep learning from good practice with our partners. Following the workshop, as I said, in 2012, where we identified, we'll scope again where we are in a year's time or two to see now that we've learned this much, we've done this much, what are the next steps in making sure that tailored climate services get to farmers and are useful. We'll be working to upscale, as I said in the previous map, in these various countries and in these various benchmark sites to indeed test the approach of scaling up for farmers, reaching as many as millions in each of these countries through our various partnerships. And finally, we'll be working to build evidence, and a very strong evidence base for the usefulness, the added value of climate information for farmer decision making, making the case for climate services really. And here, no prescription of findings. If we do find that it's not useful, we'll be the first to pack bags and say, all right, time to reconvert this work to something else because it's not useful. But I think there is scope and space to test out indeed what the added value of climate services are for farmers. Personally, I think it's mission possible. I've seen these sites, I've been to them, I've spoken with the farmers, and what we've been told time and again is that this information as of now is very useful. It runs against a number of challenges which I've exposed and which need to be addressed in concert and mostly in a coordinated fashion in each of the countries. But once we address those challenges, information is indeed very useful. And tailored climate services can support farmers within the community to appropriately anticipate risks and to do something about them before, ex ante, so that it doesn't create havoc in the communities as it is doing now. So the time is right to scale up climate services for farmers. We look forward to working with all of you to make that happen in the years to come and reach our large targets of reaching millions of farmers at scale. Thank you.
We'll be glad to answer the questions.
Please.
Okay, it's open for discussion now.
Any questions? I'm happy to respond to any.
In early part of your presentation, you were mostly giving us the case studies in many countries.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to application and scaling up from CCAFS,
Mm-hmm.
you gave only a limited number of examples. So I was expecting that since there are many case studies already, examples of successful ones,
Mm-hmm.
we would have possibly got CCAFS to use them, in a much wider scale than they are currently now.
Mm.
So what is the plan?
Thank you, Dr. Gada. That's very perceptive. So this work is new. It's very new. So the first effort was to try to even capture what's already out there and what's already done. So in the past year, that took up most of the time on this work, to try to understand what's been done, and that's the 18 good practice cases, which you refer to. The challenge is now to actually start the work. That's the big challenge. So to learn from these good practices and to indeed infuse the learning from them to reach the millions of farmers which we want to do. So the application part begins next year, whereby we'll be, as I said, focusing on the benchmark sites, but also on the countries for scaling up, to infuse the good learning that we have summarized now, that we know where we want to go, and to work with national systems to deliver on that work. So if you ask me in about a year's time, hopefully I can give you practical examples from these new and upcoming countries, Tanzania, Malawi, and Senegal, Nepal, to where we will have started by then doing some of the scaling up work which needs to be done. But the short answer is we haven't yet started on our own. We've summarized knowledge. We've shown how this can be done in practice. Now we're moving to actually do it. Thank you. Any other questions? Have people ever visited any of the India AgroMet advisory sites? Because that was the biggest source of learning as we began this work. India is one of the leaders in the globe on this line of work.
There are a number of climate services projects which are coming on the line. And for example, one which is being in the pipeline with the GIZ for the 3 or 4 states in India. And most of the cases, basically, they are trying to build on the things what have been done. But in the CCAFS approach, basically, do you have any example in anywhere where the existing technologies or existing model has been taken as such, and then above that it is built quickly?
Using technology in particular or across the board?
No. Basically the approach.
The approach.
Yeah.
At pilot level, yes. I think, as I tried to show on this one. Sorry, we'll go back to this mode. Yeah. These were the national level cases of scaling up, where they're reaching thousands of farmers in Mali and over 3 million in India. But the 16 smaller case studies showed how it can be done at the pilot level. And in each of them, they've touched 100 or even more farmers using technology, for instance, in Uganda, as I said, and using various approaches for training and for communicating. So there we got hope that indeed it's doable, because they've done it in practice, using often very limited funding to do a lot. So from those cases, indeed, we have hope that it's doable at pilot level. And because these 2 countries did it at scale as well, it's doable. But as I said, there are multiple prerequisites, the 5 challenges that have to be overcome before it can be done at scale. I'm not sure. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Wani.
What for example, in Miami itself, ICRISAT scientists have used 10 years back the community radios to reach a large number of farmers. Now it is only the content what needs to be really put it on to that sort of model, so that you can reach the target farmers whatever you need in that sort of thing. So it's an established system which has been well tested earlier. Have we made use of that sort of system for piloting or something like that? That's what I was saying.
Any more questions? We have Dilip in the room now, which is good. So this work is really fitting under that line of work very nicely here at ICRISAT, and we look forward to keeping those links. So it is information services in general, just focused on climate information in this particular instance. And one very interesting work we've started with Dilip's department is the South-South strand of work, and showing that ICTs for D, which India has amazing experience in, can be summarized and replicated in relevant sites in Africa where we're doing the work, notably in partnership with private telecom companies. So that has taken off nicely in India. It hasn't yet taken off in Africa. So we'll be learning from the India experience there to ensure that we can partner appropriately with airtel companies in Africa.
Any more questions? No? So let us show our appreciation to Dr. Arame.
Thank you.